Welcome to the IDP Plus Touchdown Props podcast, where if you're looking for prop bets to place for Week 15 of the NFL season, you've come to the right place. Stick around, I'll be getting into my favorite players to score in Week 15 of the NFL season. Yes, welcome back to another week of the IDP Plus Touchdown Props pod, where every week I've been giving you all a buffet of sorts, parlay buffet of just players that I feel good about to score on any given week. To just kind of start us off here, just to let everybody know these aren't even really suggestions. It's more or less just research that I'm sharing with you guys that I've done for my own bets. This week I didn't quite have as much time as I typically do, so we've got a little bit of a shorter list here, but we've still got 7 or 8 guys here for you guys to pick and choose from. So I'll lay out my reasoning. You guys, hear what I have to say. If anything hits home with you, feel free to pick and choose any one of these or however you like. So I will go ahead and jump right into it here in just a second. I just want to remind everyone to stay within your means. Let's all bet responsibly. For help, call 1-800-GAMBLER. And let's just try to have some fun with this. So let's jump into it. We've got a short list of running backs this week, primarily because the price point on running backs was outrageous. And believe it or not, Detroit running backs, of all the running backs, had the best price point at minus 145 for an anytime touchdown for David Montgomery and minus 165 for Gibbs. Everybody else, even in decent matchups, was like 175 or longer odds. So I didn't really like the price point of much of our running backs this week. All the guys that were in great matchups were just ridiculous. So we are good with some Detroit running backs, giving us the best money for running back touchdowns so far this week. So why not ride it? It's been the most reliable this year, and now that we finally get it to a point where we feel comfortable being able to place something, let's ride it here. They come up in a matchup against the Buffalo Bills. We've been through this with the Detroit running backs. They're again priced better than any running back or most other running backs in the NFL right now, especially the ones that have a nose for the end zone. So it's kind of fishy that the books are to price it this way, especially after a no touchdown Thursday night football matchup. It's got me wondering and curious, but at the same time, the matchup really doesn't matter. It hasn't all year. This rushing attack is going to be the first thing that Detroit uses to try to get up in this game. So I know that Detroit is going to use the ground game early, and oftentimes it's Monty or Gibbs that are the first one to punch it in and just get them up in any given week. So the Buffalo Bills allowed Garendo to score in Week 13. They allowed Kyron Williams to go for 100 plus and 2 touchdowns last week. So you made a favorable matchup plus a touchdown savant and a good price point. We like that as a solid play. Gibbs, again, I said was minus 165. You can almost go either way here. I feel good about maybe both of these guys punching it in, but David Montgomery's got the better track record, and he has only 3 games so far this season where he hasn't scored, whereas Gibbs has 4. So, I mean, it's just kind of, pick your point, not really pick your poison here, but you can't really go wrong. Because if Monty gets one on the ground, Gibbs could get one through the air, or he could very well get one on the ground. This Detroit offense scores a lot of points, so I favor Monty here, but either one's a good play. And that's really the best running back props that I found this week that I particularly liked, that didn't give me much worry for a decent price point. So we'll go ahead and we're going to jump into our receivers here, first of which being Jordan Addison to score an anytime touchdown, and this comes in at plus 170. He plays the Chicago Bears at home this week. Last week, he actually caught 3 touchdowns, and the Minnesota Vikings were just absolutely rolling. So we're going to look to carry that into this week where they play the Bears, who've allowed 5 wide receiver touchdowns in the last 4 weeks, one of which went to Addison, who went off for 160 yards and a touchdown in that time. But make no mistake, even though that he did torch them last week, JJ's caught fire recently with 2 touchdowns of his own and over 100 yards last week. You're not going to shut down Addison over JJ. I don't care what defense you're playing. You're going to put all of your focus on JJ regardless of how Addison's doing. And that's just the great part about the touchdown part of this is now that JJ is hot, he will garner all of the attention. Whereas before, maybe they could let him stretch the open field and just kind of clamp down on the end zone because he wasn't being targeted that much. So now we've got a situation where they really have to clamp down on JJ at all times. Addison ought to have a great opportunity to leak past the secondary and catch a long bomb for a big touchdown. So I like him to carry that over into this week. And again, with Chicago falling apart and Minnesota on a hell of a roll, I think this game is going to be one-sided, and I think it's going to be on the back of the passing game again. The Minnesota Vikings are going to want to keep Sam Darnold rolling if they have any expectation of making a playoff push. So now that they've got some good momentum, I think that JJ and Jordan Addison could both have big days again. JJ primarily probably being in the open field, but Addison just kind of has that big play potential, and I think he breaks one off this week. So the price point's actually crazy at plus 170, considering he's got 6 touchdowns in the last 6 weeks. Yeah, let's take advantage of that before that price point drops. Next play here for the wide receiver portion of the show, we've got Terry McLaurin coming in with an anytime touchdown at plus 120. He plays the New Orleans Saints this week. The Saints have been pretty generous to opposing wide receivers. Good teams have been able to score on the Saints so far this season, at least lately anyways, and that's really the data that's most important to us is the recent trends. So that said, multiple wide receivers have scored on this team in 3 of those 6 games. 2 of those 6 games were actually against the struggling New York Giants and Atlanta Falcons offense. So I can kind of chalk those up as like, well, I can understand, where maybe a mediocre defense can shut down a really struggling offense or, have a good week. But again, otherwise, the Rams, Chargers, and Browns have all scored 2 wide receiver touchdowns on this team just in the last 6 weeks. So McLaurin having had 3 touchdowns rolling into the bye and the Commanders needing to dominate this game in order to kind of have some good feelings going into the playoffs and to just kind of, solidify their presence in terms of just being able to make a playoff push compared to last year. So I think this is a big game for the Commanders to really make a statement, and they really need to just put the Saints out this week. I think that comes on the back of Jaden Daniels in the open field, Brian Robinson punching it in close, but then also Terry McLaurin really just stretching the field, and he's been quite a magician in terms of just catching bombs this year. There's been several games so far where he's got multiple touchdowns and just catches like 2 50-yard bombs, and that's been kind of the staple of the Commanders so far this season. So I think the New Orleans Saints present a great matchup, especially considering they traded one of their best corners just a few weeks ago. So I anticipate for the Washington Commanders to really make this game into a big game. They've had extra rest coming out of the bye now, so I think they're going to have a good game plan coming up against a New Orleans Saints team who's just kind of in the toilet right now. So I think this ought to be a good game for Terry McLaurin to continue the streak he was on going into the bye. Next play here, I was looking at the Falcons and the Raiders game, and I couldn't really. It was tough for me to. This was a tricky one here for me because I'm not really particularly fond of either offense right now, as we've seen with the Atlanta Falcons not having scored, or Kirk Cousins hasn't scored a touchdown in like 5 weeks. And his job may be on the line, so I think that's kind of where I was more tempted to play. I feel like there's got to be something here, you know what I mean, where you've got 2 struggling offenses, and both defenses are actually allowing the league's most wide receiver touchdowns in the last 6 weeks. So they've allowed 14 wide receiver touchdowns in just the last 4 weeks, and that's top 2 in the NFL in that time. So again, considering that Cousins hasn't thrown a touchdown for 5 weeks, this is a great passing matchup. His job could be on the line. Also, on the other end of the football, Vegas has nothing to lose. And if anything else, they're just looking to develop their guys and challenge some teams that have playoff hopes. And I believe Atlanta, even though they've been struggling, they're on the cusp. So this could be a big game for both teams, and I think there's going to be a lot of passing in this. Vegas should get Aiden O'Connell. From what I've seen, I believe he is looking to play this week, surprisingly enough. So I I felt as if the matchup was too good not to put something in here, but I don't really feel great about either one of these guys. Uh, in terms of just scoring a touchdown, the offense has just been too inconsistent. But the matchups are just, I mean, you can't deny 14 touchdowns allowed by both these teams in the last 4 weeks. That's ridiculous. That's over what, almost 4 touchdowns per game. So between the two of them, over 2 touchdowns apiece per game. So I like that. Just really like that matchup, and these price points are really good. Jacoby Myers gets a lot of red zone targets. He's seen almost triple of the next wide receiver in line, and London's seen 20 red zone targets, which is over 3 times more than the next Atlanta receiver in the red zone. So these two are the leading red zone target leaders on their teams in terms of at least the wide receiver rooms. These guys ought to be the first option to score. So I like the wide receiver matchups in this Atlanta Falcons and Vegas Raiders game. I think these two guys will be the first ones to get looked at when they get in the red zone. So whether or not they score remains to be seen. There's a lot of good playmakers on both of these teams. So we'll just kind of see. I hope that both of these teams can, both these offenses can kind of get things rolling and score some touchdowns here so we can really cash in. I would probably advise maybe picking the one that you feel the best about here. So let's not over invest, but there should be something we can win here. So that's going to do it for our wide receivers. We'll get into my quarterback for the week, which is going to be Jalen Hurts to score an anytime touchdown. He comes in at minus 125 against the Pittsburgh Steelers this week. With Jalen Hurts, the matchup doesn't matter. He's rushed a touchdown in. He scored a rushing touchdown in every game but 4 so far this season as a quarterback, and he even has more rushes inside the 5 than Saquon Barkley. That's a 15-13 comparison. So when they get in close, it could be a 50-50 split whether it's going to be Saquon or Jalen Hurts, but they get in close often, and both Jalen Hurts and Saquon are going to get cracks at it. Jalen Hurts has converted on 2/3 of those 15 attempts, so he's got 10 rushing touchdowns out of 15 attempts inside the 5. So that's money in close, and at minus 125 for a guy who scored so often on the ground this year, I like that tush push to punch it in one more time for us. That'll be the last of the quarterbacks, and we'll get into my lonely tight end here. We're looking at Pat Freiermuth to get an anytime touchdown. This comes in at a juicy plus 260. He plays the Philadelphia Eagles this week, and let me tell y'all, this is an outstanding matchup for tight ends, especially Pat Freiermuth, because the Eagles have allowed the most tight end touchdowns in the last 4 weeks with 4 tight end touchdowns. They've allowed Tommy Tremble, Zach Ertz, Isaiah Likely, and Mark Andrews all to score in the last 4 weeks. They've just been absolutely flooding touchdowns to the tight end position. And considering that Pat Freiermuth has 3 touchdowns in the last 4, and now we're looking at triple your wager on a team who's allowing a lot of touchdown production to opposing tight ends, and George Pickens has already been ruled out for this week, Russell Wilson's going to be looking to Freiermuth often. He's been doing that, especially with Pickens having been hampered up the last few weeks. Freiermuth has seen more looks, especially in the red zone. So I like this matchup. The matchup is great. The odds are juicy. And the script is just in favor of our tight end here. So, again, with Pickens down, I really like Freiermuth to just be heavily involved in the end zone, because the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to have to score. They're going to have to air it out, because Philadelphia is going to look to punch them in the mouth early and try to get up, because this team, Philly's been rolling. So I think Pittsburgh's going to be using the air attack a lot in this game, and Freiermuth ought to have plenty of looks in the red zone. So that'll wrap up the primary portion of the show. We'll get into a couple of honorable mentions this week. As I said before, I didn't have too much time to search, but we still got a little bit we've got a few options here for you. So for honorable mentions this week, I kind of like Jerry Jeudy playing against the Kansas City Chiefs. He comes in at plus 180 for an anytime touchdown. I'm primarily riding that connection with him and Winston. It's been unreal, and they do have a good matchup through the air against Kansas City, who should let Winston throw for 300 and at least 1 touchdown. I like that touchdown to go to Jeudy, but on the same note, Kansas City knows this is a great defense. They are going to be honing in on the biggest playmakers for the Browns, and Namely, that's going to be limiting Jerry Jeudy and making them beat you elsewhere with Njoku, Cedric Tillman, Nick Chubb. They're going to want to limit Jerry Jeudy. So to what extent, I don't know. But it's very possible that Kansas City just kind of looks to shut him down. But at the same time, Kansas City hasn't really shut anybody down. It's just been kind of one of those years where, you get a guy who's just been on a heck of a streak, and then all of a sudden he plays a defense in a good matchup that's just looking not going to be the next one in line to take that. So they will shut him down. It was, on Thursday? Didn't have any scores. That should have been there should have been tons of touchdowns on Thursday Night Football. There wasn't a single one. So, I mean, that's just the latest example. There's been plenty of teams just looking to just completely take one guy out of an offense and make them beat their defense through other means. So that'd be my only caveat. But Kansas City really has been just the best and most consistent in defending the ground game. So I think Jeudy could get loose and maybe find himself the end zone this week. That was just one of my honorable mentions. So next year we've got Marvin Harrison Jr. and Michael Wilson. They both play. Who was it? Oh yeah, they play they play the Pats this week, which is a great matchup. I didn't feel comfortable about putting them in with the rest, primarily because this offense has kind of been consistent. They'll either score 3 touchdowns where Kyler runs 3 in, he throws 1, and James Conner gets 2, or they won't get any. So, I mean, when they do pass it in, it's often been Marvin Harrison Jr. or Michael Wilson. They both are pretty well tied in terms of red zone targets so far this season. So, like I say, I'm just not sure about this offense, but they present a good matchup. So it's a top 10 matchup for wide receiver touchdowns. And like I say, they'll either just score 5 touchdowns or they won't score any. But I like the price point and I like the matchup. So I feel like Arizona has a good opportunity to punch one in through the air this week. And with Marvin Harrison Jr. and Michael Wilson's price points here, I like that. I like for at least one of these guys to score. But again, it's just kind of a dicey situation there. Do we really think that Arizona's going to come out and score a handful of passing touchdowns, or is this going to be more of a close game? So, but nonetheless, if they're going to pass one in, it's likely going to be one of these two because Trey McBride just hasn't been used in the red zone and hasn't scored a touchdown all season. So I imagine one of these guys will get a look. We just hope we can bring one in this week. So that's going to wrap up our show for Week 15. Thank you to everybody who has returned, everybody who's tuning in for the first time. Leave a comment, like, subscribe. Go ahead and check out the IDP Plus website as well. We've got tons and tons of tools for fantasy football, betting. We've got videos, articles, stat tools, data. I mean, you name it. Go check it out. It's worth it. Use code PROPS. Get a little discount there and test it out for a month. See if you like it. And I imagine that if you do that, we will be able to hook you in pretty quickly. If you just take a look at the Discord, hop in the Discord, ask your questions, comment on some YouTube videos, ask us questions on Twitter. You can follow me at AxmanIDP. DMs are always open. I'm not always posting, but I will take a look. And if I get any DMs, I will respond accordingly. So, feel free to reach out to me there. Let me know if you like anybody particularly on today's show. And with that said, I'm going to get out of here. So good luck, everybody, this week. Again, bet responsibly. If you feel like you need help, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Otherwise, let's stay within our means and let's have some fun this week. Hopefully, we can come home with a little extra cash in our pockets. So thanks, everyone, again for tuning in. And we'll see you back here next week for Week 16 of the IDP Plus Touchdown Props podcast. Good luck.
Thank you for watching the IDP Plus YouTube network. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Be sure to tap the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload new content.